Good day and welcome back to Scriptures Unlocked. In this presentation, we'll take a look at Genesis chapter 24. And in this chapter, we will read about the narrative and the arrangement that Abraham made with his servant as it regards to getting a bride for his son Isaac. So this presentation is entitled A Bride for Isaac. Genesis 24, with its 67 verses, is the longest chapter in the book of Genesis, and its main focus is on the arrangement that the aging Abraham made with his servant to seek a wife for his son Isaac, because it's clear that Abraham thought that the day of his death was approaching, and it was high time for Isaac, who was now 40 years old, to get married and start to have children. When we consider, viewers, Abraham's ancestry, most of his forefathers, that is, the descendants of Shem, were married and started their family before they reached the age of 40 years old, as we can see on screen. So Shem, we know, was 100 years old when he begot his son Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Arphaxad was 35 years old when he begot Salah. Salah was 30 years old when he begot Eber. Eber was 34 years old when he begot Peleg. And Peleg was 30 years old when he begot Rehu. And Rehu was 32 years old when he got Serug. And Serug was 30 years old when he begot Nahor. And Nahor was 29 years old when he begot Terah, who was the father of Abraham. So according to Genesis 25, verse 20, Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. So the events of Genesis 24 took place when Abraham was 140 years old, because remember, Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. And notice what we are told in the very first verse of Genesis 24. And Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and Jehovah had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house, that ruled over all that he had, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I'll make thee swear by Jehovah, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. But thou shalt go unto my country and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. So viewers, Abraham was very specific in what he commanded his eldest servant and steward of his house to do. And this person was possibly Eliezer, who we were introduced to in Genesis 15, verse 2 to 3. Getting a wife among his own kindred was so important to Abraham that he made his servant swear to carry out his precise instruction. Abraham made his servant place his hand under his thigh, which was an ancient custom when making a solemn oath which carried severe consequences for the oath breaker. The thigh, viewers, was a euphemism for the male sex organ, that is the penis, including the testicles, which generates life. So by placing his hand under Abraham's quote-unquote thigh, this servant was now obligated to fulfill its oath or be subjected to the wrath of Abraham's offspring if he did not fulfill his sworn duty. The possible punishment for breaking such an oath includes sterility by castration, or the oath breaker would face potential death, he along with any offspring that he might have. So viewers, today we swear on Bibles, especially in courtrooms, by raising our right hand. But back then, that was a custom and culture to swear by placing your hand under a person's quote-unquote thigh, which is to cup the penis, including the testicles. How do I know this? The Hebrew word translated as thigh is yarek. It occurs 34 times. It is Strong's H 3409. Look out for that number. It has been translated as thigh 21 times, meaning the literal thigh, side 7 times, shaft 3 times, loins twice, and body once. So thigh in this context refers to the loins as the seat of procreative power. Thigh, or yarek, euphemistically the generative parts, meaning the penis, including the scrotum and the testicles. So viewers, Abraham literally made his trusted servant swear upon his loins, that is his descendants, which is what the Hebrew word yarek means in this context, as can be seen in the following verses. For example, people might say, I swear upon the lives of my children. So that is what was happening here. Notice how this word Yarek, Strong's H 3409, is used in other verses. In Genesis 46:26, notice what we are told. All the souls that came with Jacob into Egypt, which came out of his loins, that is Yarek, meaning they are his direct offspring. So all the souls that came with Jacob into Egypt, which came out of his loins, besides Jacob's sons' wives, all the souls were 76. And notice Genesis 47, verse 29 onwards. It says this, and the time drew nigh that Israel, that's Jacob, must die. And he called his son Joseph and said unto him, if now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, a similar thing that Abraham requested of his trusted servant. That word thigh is the same Hebrew word yarek. And deal kindly and truly with me, bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt, and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And notice, Jacob did not take Joseph's word for it. Jacob said, swear unto me. And he swore unto him by placing his hand under his thigh, and Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. And finally, Exodus 1 verse 5 says this, and all the souls that came out of the loins, that's the Hebrew word Yarek, of Jacob, were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. Therefore, viewers, putting one's hand under another person's quote-unquote thigh was an idiomatic expression which refers to the person's loins or genitals, which is the area involved in procreation. In the ancient world, the thigh or genitals was the source and symbol of procreation, from which the patriarch derived his position as head of the family he created. Viewers, it wasn't good enough for Joseph to swear verbally, because Jacob made him perform the patriarchal oath, and this oath is normally taken when the patriarch senses that his time on earth is drawing to a close. He believes that he's going to die soon thereafter. So he asked them to perform this patriarchal oath by putting their hand under his thigh with God as their witness. And true to his word, Joseph honored the oath he made to his father Jacob. So upon his death, Joseph and his brothers brought Jacob's body back to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of Machpelah with his ancestors. So let's now examine the terms of the solemn oath that Abraham's servant agreed to uphold. Notice what Abraham requested of him. 4 things. 1, thou shalt not, and I repeat, thou shalt not take a wife for my son from among the daughters of the Canaanites. Why? Because the Canaanites were sexually immoral. And we can read about this in Leviticus chapter 18. The entire chapter speaks about the immorality of the Canaanites. The Canaanites were also the product of incest, according to Genesis 9 verse 22. And as a result of this incestuous acts perpetrated upon Noah's wife by Ham, his son, Noah cursed Canaan's lineage. So the Canaanites were a cursed lineage. And we can see this in Genesis 9 verse 25 as well. The second thing that Abraham requested of his servant was that thou shalt go unto my country. Abraham came initially from the Ur of the Chaldees. The third thing is that Abraham said he was to go specifically to my kindred and take a wife unto my son Isaac. And the fourth and final thing that Abraham asked of his servant was this: beware thou that thou bring not my son thither again. In other words, Isaac must not be allowed to leave the land of Canaan and go to Abraham's land of nativity. Notice now Genesis 24 verse 5 and 6. And the servant said unto him, peradventure the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. Must I needs bring thy son again unto the land from whence thou camest? And notice Abraham's response: beware thou that thou bring not my son thither again. Abraham made it absolutely clear to his servant that Isaac was not to be taken back to Mesopotamia, but he wanted Isaac's wife brought to the promised land without Isaac ever leaving Canaan. You see, viewers, Abraham had learned his lesson, because he should have never left Canaan. He went down to Egypt because of the famine, because God told him that he was giving him the land of Canaan, and God did not tell him to leave Canaan and go into Egypt. So Abraham learned his lesson and he didn't want his son Isaac making the same mistake. So Isaac was never supposed to leave the land of Canaan under any circumstance. God specifically promised Abraham and his descendants the land of Canaan as an inheritance. And Abraham trusted in God's ability to fulfill what he had promised, which is why he said this to his servant. Notice verse 7 to 9. Jehovah, God of heaven, which took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and which spake unto me, and that sware unto me, saying, unto thy seed will I give this land. He shall send his angel before thee. So Abraham believed that God would prosper his servant's journey and that God would send an angel to guide him in his way and lead him directly to Abraham's kindred. And thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. And notice now that Abraham was now going to give his servant an escape clause, an out, so to speak. Notice what he said. And if the woman will not be willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from this my oath. But he also gave a caveat. Only bring not my son thither again. So if the woman doesn't want to come back to the land of Canaan, you will be free from the oath that you have taken. Nothing will happen to you. But finally, Abraham stressed that under no circumstance at all must you bring back my son to Mesopotamia. And the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning that matter. So Abraham and his descendants knew God's covenant concerning the promised land, which is precisely why Jacob's dying wish was to be buried back in Canaan, even though he died in Egypt. Jacob wanted to be buried in the promised land with his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham. And as we looked at in the previous presentation, all the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were buried in the field that Abraham purchased from Ephron the Hittite in the cave of Machpelah. And verse 10, after swearing that he would agree to Abraham's terms, the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed. For all the goods of his master were in his hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia unto the city of Nahor. And Abraham at this time lived in Hebron, because that's where Sarah died. So Abraham's servant journeyed from Hebron to Haran, and it was a distance of 468 miles, which would take him about over 17 days to accomplish, because they were traveling on camels, and they would stop, especially in the nights, to rest. So it will take a considerable number of days for them to get from Hebron to Haran. So when he reached Nahor, the servant made his camels to kneel down without the city by a well of water at the time of the evening, even the time that women go out to draw water, to refresh himself, but as well to gather information as to where he would be able to find Abraham's kindred. So viewers, he traveled with 10 camels of the camels of his master. So back then, only the wealthy owned camels, such as the kings and the pharaohs. So for Abraham's servant to be traveling with 10 camels was a demonstration of Abraham's considerable wealth. And his first port of call was the community well, because he was now going to gather some information as to his next steps in finding Abraham's relatives. So here on screen, you can see the journey that Abraham's servant took from Hebron to Nahor, which was also known as Aram Naharaim, in Mesopotamia. And Mesopotamia is a land between two rivers. So here you have the Tigris River and the Euphrates River, which is in present-day Iraq. So viewers, Abraham's servant clearly believed in his master's God, because he prayed for his mission to be successful. And one of the things that we'll notice throughout this chapter is that this servant constantly referred to Abraham as my master. So he always placed the focus on Abraham. He had a duty to perform, but he is making it very clear that his mission was to carry out his master's instruction. So as we go through the rest of the chapter, you'll realize and look out for this phrase, my master. He kept referring to Abraham as his master. So notice now, Genesis 24, verse 12. Having reached the city of Nahor, he said, O Jehovah, God of my master, there it is, Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day and show kindness unto my master Abraham. So twice in one verse, he refers to Abraham as my master. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. And notice his prayer. Notice what he was looking for in the woman that he wanted to be the bride for Isaac. And let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, let down thy pitcher, I pray thee that I may drink. And she shall say, drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac. And thereby shall I know that thou hast showed kindness unto my master. And here you can see a picture of Abraham's trusted servant praying to God to prosper his mission. And in the background, you can see 3 of the 10 camels that he came with. Abraham's servant, viewers, knew what he was looking for in a woman. So he prayed that God would provide a good wife for his master's son. He was hoping to find a woman who was caring, virtuous, and showed hospitality to strangers. He asked God for the type of woman that he was looking for, and he wanted God to bring about what he requested as a sign the very same day, without hesitation. And lo and behold, before he even finished speaking, God answered his prayer according to Isaiah 65 verse 24, which says, and it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. So while this servant of Abraham was praying, asking God for the kind of woman that he wanted for his master's son, before he was even finished praying, Rebekah came to the well, and she was a direct answer to his prayer. Notice now Genesis 24, verse 15 onwards. And it came to pass, before he had done speaking, that behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. So God answered his prayer. Not only did God brought him safely to the city of Nahor, but the very first person that came out at the well to meet him was one of Abraham's relatives. And the damsel was very fair. She was very beautiful to look upon, a virgin. Neither had any man known her, and she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up. So notice the well was downward. So you had to go down, you had to descend into the well and come up back with the water. And the servant ran to meet her and said, let me, I pray thee, drink a little water of thy pitcher, because this was the first condition that he was looking for. And she said, drink. She met the first condition, my lord. And she hasted and let down her pitcher upon her hand and gave him drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also until they have done drinking. So this was the second condition that he had prayed for, and God answered his prayer immediately. And notice what we are told. And she hasted and emptied her pitcher into the trough and ran again onto the well to draw water and drew for all his camels. So here she had fulfilled 3 of the things that he was looking for. So clearly he wanted a beautiful woman for his master's son. She offered him drink, so she was very generous, very charitable, and she also offered to water 10 camels that he had. So here you can see on screen a picture of Rebekah, a beautiful woman here with a pitcher on her shoulder. Viewers, only a few women have been named specifically in the scriptures as being fair or beautiful. The first person to be so named was Sarah. And Genesis 12 verse 14 tells us that Sarah was very fair. That is, she was very beautiful. We are now reading about Rebekah in Genesis 24 verse 16. The Bible says that she was fair to look upon. Rachel, Jacob's favored wife, was beautiful according to Genesis 29 verse 17. So far we are seeing that the first 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their wives were beautiful. The next woman to be so named is Abigail. The Bible tells us that she was of a beautiful countenance in 1 Samuel 25 verse 3. In 2 Samuel 11 verse 2, Bathsheba was said to be very beautiful to look upon. Tamar, David's daughter, who was raped by Amnon, she was sister to Absalom, was also considered to be of a fair countenance in 2 Samuel 14, verse 27. And Queen Vashti was said to be fair to look upon in Esther 1, verse 11. And Hadassah, who was renamed Esther, was considered not only to be fair, but beautiful in Esther 2, verse 7. So viewers, these 8 women have been so specifically named in scripture as being very beautiful or fair. So here you can see on screen, Rebecca giving Abraham's servant a drink of water. And she also watered his camels. Camels, viewers, can drink large amounts of water in a short space of time. They can drink about 30 gallons or 113 liters in about 13 minutes. So you can see the length of time that it would have taken for Rebecca to go down to the well, bring up the water to feed the camels, and how long it would take them to drink. Camels are able to rehydrate faster than any other mammal because of their oval-shaped blood cells, and they can survive for several months without water. Camels can endure high body temperatures without sweating, which helps them to retain water. And here is a short video of camels drinking water at a trough. Notice them guzzling up the water. So viewers, Rebecca was everything that Abraham's servant was looking for in a mate, because she possessed all the qualities and attributes that would make her a suitable bride for Isaac. 1, she was very beautiful. 2, she was charitable. 3, she was selfless. And 4, she was industrious. She was a hardworking woman. And it must have taken considerable time and effort for Rebecca to descend and ascend from the well in order to provide water for all 10 camels. Viewers, God's providence was clearly at play, because before Abraham's servant even finished praying, the very first person that came to the well was the woman ordained for Isaac, and she fulfilled the sign that Abraham's servant had requested, since she not only gave him drink, but graciously offered to water his camels as well. And notice what we are told in Genesis 24, verse 21 onwards. And the man, wondering at this beautiful woman, held his peace as he watched her go down to the well and came back up and watered the camels. So he wondered at her in admiration to know whether Jehovah had made his journey prosperous or not. And based on what he was seeing, he knew that God had answered his prayer immediately. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold, and said, he asked her 2 questions. Whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee, is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? At this point in time, he did not know that she was related to Abraham at all. Abraham's servant watched in admiration of Rebekah's disposition, and when she was done watering his camels, he gave her jewels of gold as a reward for her generosity. So in answering his questions, she stated the following. Genesis 24, verse 25 says this, I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. And she said moreover unto him, we have both straw and provender enough, and room to lodge in. And when he heard that, he said, blessed be Jehovah, God of my master Abraham, who hath not left destitute my master of his mercy. And I being in the way, Jehovah led me to the house of my master's brethren. So here again in this verse, Abraham's servant referred to him as my master 3 times. On screen, you can see Terah's family tree. Terah was Abraham's father. Terah had 3 sons and 1 daughter. Haran, who died in Ur of the Chaldees, Nahor, and Abraham. And he also had Sarai. Abraham married Sarai, his sister. And Sarai gave birth to Isaac, who was the promised son. Nahor had 8 sons with his wife, Milcah. He also had a daughter with her. So here, Bethuel was the father of Rebekah. So Rebekah was Abraham's nephew's daughter. And Rebekah was now going to become Isaac's wife. And when we looked at Genesis 22, I deliberately left out this part of the chapter because I was going to use it in this presentation. So in Genesis 22, verse 20 to 24, we are told that after Abraham offered to sacrifice his son Isaac, after those things, it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. Huz is firstborn, and Buz is brother, and Kemuel the father of Aram, Chesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begat Rebekah, who we are reading about now. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Ruma, she bare also Tebah, and Gaham, and Thahash, and Maacah. So viewers, not only did God prosper his journey, but the servant thanked God for leading him directly to Abraham's family and kindred. And when Rebekah heard that her master's son was actually her relative, the damsel ran and told them of her mother's house these things. And notice now we are going to be introduced to Rebekah's brother, Laban. And Rebekah had a brother, and his name was Laban. And Laban ran out unto the man unto the well when he heard about all the things and all the possessions and what he gave his sister. Notice what we are told. Moses here is telling us the type of man and character that Laban was. And it came to pass, notice, when he saw the earring and bracelets upon his sister's hands, and when he heard the words of Rebekah his sister, saying, Thus spake the man unto me, that he came unto the man breathlessly, and behold, he stood by the camels at the well. And notice what he then said, Come in, thou blessed of Jehovah. Wherefore standest thou without? For I prepared the house and room for the camels. So viewers, so much of Laban's character was on display in this brief introduction of him, because the narrative revealed that he was really motivated by greed, and not because he was hospitable or charitable like his sister. He saw the precious gifts that Rebekah received and was trying to ingratiate himself to Abraham's servant. And the man, that's Abraham's servant, came into the house, and he ungirded his camels and gave straw and provender for the camels, and water to wash his feet and the men's feet that were with him. So he was not traveling alone. And there was set meat before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat until I have told mine errand. And he said, Speak on. So here we can see that Laban was usurping Bethuel's position as the patriarch of the family. And he was now speaking on behalf of his father, who was very much alive and well. Marital arrangements was normally conducted with the head of the family on behalf of his daughter. But here we can see that Laban was inserting himself into the process. Abraham's servant was now going to outline the reason for him traveling to Haran. Notice what he then relays to Bethuel, Laban, and their mother about his mission. He said, Genesis 24, verse 34 onwards, I am Abraham's servant, and Jehovah hath blessed my master greatly. He is become great, and he had given him flocks, and herds, and silver, and gold, and men servants, and maid servants, and camels, and asses. You can just imagine how Laban's eyes must have lit up after hearing these things, that Abraham was a very wealthy man. And Sarah, my master's wife, bare a son to my master when she was old, and unto him hath he given all that he had. So Isaac, who was to become Rebekah's husband, was also a very wealthy man, because he was the heir of all his father's possession. And my master made me swear, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife to my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell, but thou shalt go unto my father's house, and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son. And I said unto my master, Peradventure the woman will not follow me. And he said unto me, Jehovah, before whom I walk, will send his angel with thee, and prosper thy way. And thou shalt take a wife for my son, of my kindred, and of my father's house. So Abraham had faith that his mission would be successful. Then thou shalt be clear from this my oath, when thou comest to my kindred, and if they give not thee one, thou shalt be clear from my oath. And I came this day unto the well, and said, O Jehovah, God of my master Abraham, if now thou do prosper my way which I go, behold, I stand by the well of water, and it shall come to pass that when the virgin cometh forth to draw water, and I say to her, give me, I pray thee, a little water of thy pitcher to drink. And she said to me, both drink thou, and I will also draw for thy camels. Let the same be the woman whom Jehovah hath appointed out for my master's son. And before I done speaking in mine heart, behold, Rebekah came forth with her pitcher on her shoulder, and she went down unto the well and drew water. And I said unto her, let me drink, I pray thee. And she made haste, and let down her pitcher from her shoulder, and said, drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. So I drank, and she made the camels drink also. And I asked her and said, whose daughter art thou? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bare unto him. And I put the earring upon her face, and the bracelets upon her hands. And I bowed my head and worshipped Jehovah, and blessed Jehovah, God of my master Abraham, which had led me in the right way to take my master's brother's daughter unto his son. And now, if you will deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, the thing proceeded from Jehovah. We cannot speak unto thee bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before thee. Take her and go, and let her be thy master's son's wife, as Jehovah hath spoken. And it came to pass that when Abram's servant heard their words, he worshipped Jehovah, bowing himself to the earth. And the servant was now going to provide dowry, gifts to Rebekah and to her family for the loss that they will suffer as a result of Rebekah leaving. And the servant brought forth jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, and gave them to Rebekah. He gave also to her brother and to her mother precious things. And they did eat and drink, he and the men that were with him, and tarried all night. And they rose up in the morning, and he said, send me away unto my master. And their brother and their mother said, it would appear here that they were now trying to squeeze some more things out of Abraham's servant by extending his stay. Notice what they said. Let the damsel abide with us a few days, at the least 10. After that she shall go. Because remember earlier, the father and the brother had said, here's Rebekah, take her and go, and let her be my master's son's wife. And now they were now requesting for her to stay more days. And notice what Abraham's servant said. He was a man on a mission. Hinder me not, seeing Jehovah had prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. And they said, we will call the damsel and inquire at her mouth. And they called Rebekah and said unto her, wilt thou go with this man? And she said, I will go. And they sent away Rebekah their sister and their nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions. And incidentally, this is the first and only time in the scriptures, or in the King James Version, that the word million is mentioned. It simply means become the mother of thousands, because 1,000 was the highest number, and it was a multiplier that was used to express a large number or for a multitude. So they said, thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gate of those which hate them. And Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man. And the servant took Rebekah and went his way. So viewers, once the marriage proposal was made and accepted, Abraham's servant wasted no time and promptly made his departure from Haran. And here on screen you can see Abraham's servant and Rebekah upon camels heading back to his master. Genesis 24 verse 62 tells us what transpired as they neared home. And Isaac came from the field of the well Lahai Roi. This is the same well that Hagar ran away to, and the angel of Jehovah found her by. For he dwelt in the south country. Isaac was now living in Beersheba, in the Negev, which is the Hebrew word for south. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide. And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes And when she saw Isaac, she lighted off the camel. For she had said unto the servant, What man is this that walketh in the field to meet us? And the servant had said, It is my master. So notice here, he now refers to Isaac as his master, where previously he was referring to Abraham as his master. Because remember, the fact that Abraham made him swear, Abraham thought that he was about to die. And the servant, in his mind, didn't expect to come back and find Abraham living, because such an oath was only taken when one believed in their heart and how they felt in their body that they were about to die. So the servant now referred to Isaac as his master, because Isaac would inherit everything that Abraham had. So if Abraham had died, Isaac would now become his master. Therefore, she took a veil and covered herself. So we can see, so this is one of the genesis of where we get veils in marriage. And the servant told Isaac all things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So here again, the marriage did not take place immediately. There was a marriage ceremony. Abraham, who was still much alive, was involved because he's the one that made the arrangement. He would see to that his son got married. And what Isaac did here by taking Rebekah into his mother's tent was to signal to his camp that Sarah was now the matriarch of the family. She was now the lady in charge, as was Sarah when she was alive and Abraham was her husband. Remember now, Isaac was 37 years old when his mother died. And now he was 40 years old. So 3 years had passed since his mother died. So he was still in the grieving process. So the scripture tells us that when he married Rebekah, he was now comforted following his mother's death. Viewers, throughout this chapter, we saw God's providence on display. And we can also see a few parallels between Isaac and Jesus. Additionally, Isaac's marriage to Rebekah foreshadows Jesus' future marriage to the church. So our previous mention of Isaac took place in Genesis 22 when he was spared from death, which was symbolic of him being resurrected. And now the next time we see Isaac in Genesis chapter 24, he's now being united with his bride, Rebekah. Similarly, we last heard from Jesus shortly after his resurrection from the dead. And the very next time that we will physically see and hear from Jesus is when he is united with his bride, the church, at his second coming. Because 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 16 and 17 tells us this. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first, and we which are alive and remain shall be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. So that is the next time that we will physically see and hear from Jesus, when he is united with his church. And the church is the bride of Christ. Jesus Christ is the Lamb of God which takes away the sin of the world. Finally, there are so many parallels that can be drawn between Isaac and Jesus, since Isaac is the type and Jesus the antitype. Notice some of the parallels between Isaac and Jesus. Both Isaac and Jesus were sons of promise. Isaac was promised to Abraham and Sarah. Jesus Christ is a promised son. Jesus was promised from as early as Genesis 3 verse 15 as the seed of the woman. Isaiah 9 verse 6 says, unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. He is a child of promise. Both Isaac and Jesus were named before their birth. Isaac was so named because when God told Abraham that he and Sarah would have a son, he laughed. And when Sarah heard, she also laughed. Hence his name was called Yitzhak. Jesus Christ, the angel Gabriel told Mary that thou shalt call his name Yeshua, which is Hebrew, or Jesus, because he shall save his people from their sins. So both Isaac and Jesus were named before their birth. Both Isaac and Jesus were conceived miraculously. Remember, Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age. Sarah had reached the stage of menopause, and she was barren her entire life. Jesus, on the other hand, was conceived by the Holy Spirit, and his mother was a virgin, something that is unheard of. Both Isaac and Jesus were offered up as a sacrifice by their father upon Mount Moriah. Both Isaac and Jesus were resurrected from the dead, Isaac symbolically and Jesus physically. both Isaac and Jesus were espoused to one wife. So Abraham had more than one wives. The next presentation, we'll look at Genesis chapter 25, where Abraham would take another wife, Keturah. He also had a concubine by the name of Hagar. Jesus will only be espoused, Jesus will only be married to one wife, the church. Both Isaac and Jesus brought their wives to their father's house. Rebekah was brought back to his master's house by the servant. And Isaac brought her into his mother's tent, which was located where his father was living. And Jesus promised to take us to his father's house. Jesus said, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. If I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." Jesus right now is in his father's house in the kingdom of heaven. And when he returns for his bride, he will take us to his father's house, the New Jerusalem in heaven. Viewers, we are now approaching the end of Abraham's life. At this point in time, in Genesis 24, Abraham was 140 years old when Isaac got married. Abraham, who thought he would die, would live for another 35 years because he died at the ripe old age of 175 years old. And we are now going to be transitioning from the life of Abraham to the life of Isaac. So we are now setting the stage for Isaac to be the focus. So the next chapter, Genesis 25, will look at the death of Abraham, and then we will start in earnest to look at the life of Isaac and Rebekah. So have yourselves a great day and Happy New Year to all my viewers.